Welcome back to Cass Mystery, where the darkest corners of the unknown are brought to light. Tonight I have 3 chilling real-life stories from people who ventured into forgotten buildings only to encounter the unexpected. These aren't your average haunted house tales. These are stories of real danger, disturbing encounters, and mysteries that remain unsolved. So turn off the lights, plug in your headphones, and prepare to be unnerved. The House in the Woods. 2 years ago, in a small quiet town surrounded by dense forest, there was a house left untouched for nearly 2 decades. Everyone knew of it, but no one talked about it anymore. It was tucked deep into the woods, almost completely consumed by nature. Once on the market, the property had sat unwanted for years, until even the path to it was forgotten. One afternoon, a young man with a fascination for urban exploration decided to visit the house alone. Normally, he'd go with friends, but this place seemed so close and harmless that he didn't bother asking anyone. With a flashlight in his backpack, he trekked through what remained of the gravel driveway, now overtaken by grass and vines. It took longer to reach the house than he remembered. The forest had grown thick, and the structure was almost camouflaged in the shadows of the trees. It stood tall like a 2-story wooden cabin, worn and sagging from years of neglect. He peeked through a broken front window, listening intently. All was silent. The front door was slightly ajar, and with one gentle push, it creaked open. Inside was a time capsule. Torn, dusty furniture, shattered photo frames, even dishes left on the table as if the former occupants had vanished in the middle of dinner. Upstairs, the floorboards groaned with every step. The second floor had 2 rooms. One was open and empty. He stepped inside, scanning with his flashlight, until a sudden thud from downstairs. He froze. It wasn't the kind of sound an old house made. It was deliberate. Heart pounding, he hurried downstairs, sweeping his flashlight across the darkness. The house was silent again. Nothing moved. Then he saw it, the front door. It was shut tight. He knew he had left it wide open. Panicking, he rushed over. The knob wouldn't budge. Locked. Someone had locked him in. Without hesitation, he sprinted to the broken window, climbed out, and fled into the forest. But just minutes into his escape, flashing red and blue lights flickered through the trees. 2 police cruisers were pulling up to the house. He hid and watched as the officers rushed inside. Somehow he knew they weren't there for him. Something, or someone, had been in that house with him. To this day, no public report was ever released. Whatever happened that night remains a mystery. The Factory Lurker. In 2016, 3 college roommates, Jason, Andrew, and our storyteller, decided to take a break from their exhausting school and work schedules. Their idea of fun, a bit of urban exploration. Andrew had recently heard about an abandoned factory on the outskirts of their Midwestern city. Using satellite view on Google Maps, they located it and drove to a nearby gas station to park. The surrounding neighborhood was a ghost town, eerily quiet with no people or traffic. The factory was massive, a decaying beast of metal and concrete, tagged with graffiti in places that defied logic. A chain-link fence with barbed wire had been cut in several places, a welcome mat for those brave enough to enter. The trio crawled through and stepped into the main structure. The metal groaned with the wind, echoing through the cavernous space. Inside was a maze of rusted machinery and walkways, dimly lit by their cheap flashlights. Eventually, the narrator wandered into a hallway, checking over his shoulder and seeing one of his friends nearby. or so he thought. Confident he wasn't alone, he ventured deeper, through another metal door. That's when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, expecting to see Andrew or Jason. No one. He called out. Silence. Then a faint scuffling sound from behind. He spun around. There, just feet away, stood a deranged-looking man. Long hair, wild eyes, and a twisted expression. No hesitation, the man charged. The narrator barely made it through the door, slamming it shut behind him and running back the way he came. His friends heard him shouting and met him in the hallway. Together, they bolted out of the factory, not stopping until they reached the car. Someone had been waiting inside that factory, watching, hiding, and almost succeeded in separating one of them. They never went exploring again. The church visitor, 5 years ago in the quiet lull of winter break, 2 high schoolers named Colton and his best friend decided to kill time exploring their hometown. That night, they remembered a local legend, an abandoned church at the end of a forgotten road. Colton had always been scared of it as a kid, but something about that night felt different. They were feeling bold. The road to the church was overgrown and cracked, the forest reclaiming its path. When they arrived, the old chapel stood like a relic from another world. Vines tangled around the fence, and the building itself seemed to absorb the moonlight. Pushing open the heavy wooden doors, they were struck by the untouched stillness inside. Rows of pews remained perfectly aligned. No vandalism, no trash, just silence. Their footsteps echoed eerily as they walked down the central aisle. Near the podium, a loud thud rang through the air. Startled, they lit their phone flashlights and scanned the area. Nothing moved. Colton suggested they check another room near the entrance. Inside were chairs, boxes, a storage space maybe. That's when they heard it. Footsteps, slow, steady, deliberate. They were coming down the aisle, from where they had just been. Peeking through the door crack, they saw a shadow pass by. Someone walked out the front entrance. The footsteps stopped. Then, the front door creaked shut. Frozen in fear, the boys waited several minutes before bolting out. They didn't stop running until they reached the main road. Whatever had been in that church with them had been just feet away the whole time. There were no other exits in the chapel. Whoever it was had been hiding in the dark, waiting. To this day, neither of them knows what they saw. 3 abandoned places. 3 stories that start with curiosity and end in terror. Whether it's a house sealed by silence, a derelict factory hiding predators, or a church with a ghostly visitor, the unknown is never far. If you enjoy true horror stories like these, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. This is Cass Mystery, where the shadows come alive. Stay curious and stay safe.